You're listening to Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast for and by Rockies fans on Rocky Mountain Rooftop. Thank you for joining us as we discuss all things baseball and Colorado Rockies.
Hello, everybody. Welcome here to another edition of Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast for the Rocky Mountain Rooftop Network, a proud affiliate of the Fans First Sports Network. I'm your host, Skylar Timmons, sucking on a lifesaver to clear my throat. Had a weekend of calling basketball games, and I'm joined here once again by Evan Lang.
You lied to me. You said it was a Werther's original.
The Werther's. There was two options on the desk, and I grabbed the lifesaver.
How can we continue this podcast on a platform of dishonesty?
Because if I choke on this lifesaver, I will be saved by the lifesaver.
Do you know that's a myth?
Did Mythbusters try that?
No, but it was a myth that they were invented to have the hole in the middle so that you couldn't choke on them.
Well, let's put it to the test. Skylar's choking live on air.
What is this, a Chris Bryant at bat?
Hey-o, hey-o. That's so stupid. But yeah, fun stuff here. Here on Affected by Altitude, we're in that weird lull in the season. Prospect lists have come out. Everybody's down in spring training. They're getting ready to kick that off here in about a week or two. So we have baseball this month, Evan. By the end of the month, we'll see the Rockies take on the Arizona Diamondbacks at Salt River Fields at Talking Stick down in Arizona, which, hey, I don't know about you, but I'm itching for some fun baseball action back in the game.
I am very, very ready for baseball.
Mm-hmm. Now, Rockies baseball, that's another thing, but baseball in general, ready for it to come back.
You know, I'm ready for Rockies baseball too. I know that it's going to be a difficult season. I know that it's probably going to be a hard one. But at the same time, it's been long enough. I'm ready. I'm ready to be heard again.
Yeah, we're ready for our hearts to be broken once again on opening day. Luckily, it's against the Tampa Bay Rays at a random location, so hopefully it won't be as bad as last season with Arizona. But, it's that weird lull in the season. Just kind of sitting around waiting for pitchers and catchers to report and start seeing stuff rolling in and the whatnot. But the first thing we can talk about here, Evan, well, the Rockies have announced pretty much their entire organizational staff in the front office, down in the minor leagues. A lot of familiar faces returning. Pedro Lopez is the manager down in Albuquerque, along with pretty much that entire staff is returning from last season. Jordan Pacheco is hitting coach. Chris Michalak is pitching coach. Michael Ryan bench coach. Pretty status quo there. Down in Double-A, you got Bobby Meacham, who was manager of the year. He's still there. There's a couple of changes down there, but across the board, there's a lot of continuity across the upper levels, and then maybe in the lower levels, there's a little more swapping with high A and single A. But a lot of familiar names, kind of status quo for the Rockies organization.
Yeah, the two big shakeups in terms of minor league affiliates are High A Spokane and Low A Fresno. Fresno has a new manager in Cesar Galvez, with Steve Solis being promoted. So Steve Solis has moved up to take over the role of catching and game planning coordinator, which was vacated by Dustin Garneau because Dustin Garneau was named the Rockies bullpen coach for the upcoming season. And then, so Fresno also has a new bench coach and a new hitting coach, as well as a new athletic trainer. And then High A Spokane, they have a new bench coach, they have a new hitting coach, and they have both new athletic trainers and performance coaches. So lots of shakeups on those teams, though the Spokane Indians, I think the two most important people on that staff were the manager, Robinson Cancel, and the pitching coach, Blaine Beatty, and both of them are still here. Mm-hmm. That pitching staff down in Spokane was a huge reason as to why they were the Northwest League champions this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, between the mix of talent and then just, the new fresh arms and the good coaching there. So that's good to see. And Trevor Burmeister, who was the Fresno hitting coach. Fresno, pretty good offensive year. They've typically had good offensive year down there, but he'll come up to high A. And I think, Evan, it seems like his priority number one, maybe to start the season, if Charlie Condon's down there, is to get Condon back on the right track offensively.
Yeah, I think it's tough just because we don't know where Condon is going to start. I think it's like a 50-50 shot between he starts in Spokane and he starts in just AA Hartford.
I think he goes to Spokane just because the Rockies like to stick guys at a spot where they already struggled, and like they're not keen on like advancing a guy if he hasn't conquered a previous level unless absolutely necessary. That's why it's expected Amador will start in AA next year.
Yeah, I mean they've done it with a couple different guys, but I think you're right, and especially one of the big things with High A Spokane was that their offense did kind of peter out towards the end of the season, and I think a big reason why they want to shake up that hitting coaching staff is to try and avoid that again next year. Because yeah, the Indians had a great season, but their offense hit kind of a lull towards the back half of the season, and the Rockies as an organization are trying to get better in terms of hitting development, and so I think it's an interesting move where basically everybody moved one level up.
Yeah.
So Greg Jones, no, not that one, who was the Arizona Complex League hitting coach, is now the hitting coach in Fresno.
He's pulling double duty, Evan. He's going to play in Albuquerque, but also coach in Single A Fresno.
Sure, let's go with that. And then, like you said, Trevor Burmeister moving up from Fresno to Spokane. It's going to be interesting, though, because on the regular organizational staff side of things, not really a whole lot of shakeup when it comes to the hitting coordinators. Pretty much everybody in terms of hitting is the same. Nick Wilson is the primary hitting coordinator. Michael Ramirez is the Latin American hitting coordinator. And the rest of the player development staff has all remained largely the same. So it's interesting that in the lower levels, they shook things up a lot. In AAA and AA, they really didn't shake things up at all. And then again, on the major organizational staff level, not any major shakeups at all. It also is, of course, worth noting, as is the Rockies' way, very little in terms of people being brought in from outside the organization.
Yeah.
On the Rockies organizational staff, none of the new faces have never been with the Rockies before. They're all familiar faces. And the only new people to the organization are mostly performance people. So you've got Allison Krajewski, who's the new physical performance coach with High A Spokane, and you've got Kota Omizu, who is the new athletic trainer for Low A Fresno. The only real new face to the organization in terms of on-field coaching staff is new Single A Fresno bench coach Dave Keller, who is 65 years old and has been for the last 10 years a sort of roving coach and Latin American instructor with the Chicago Cubs. His last on-field coaching job was in 2014 with the then Daytona Cubs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that thing with the Rockies where not necessarily a terrible thing down in the minors. It's that weird thing of, just listen to the water coming in through the microphone, the liquid.
Oh, I was mixing up my coffee. I didn't think you guys could hear that.
I could hear that trickling in. Speaking of trickling in, it's just kind of that trickle effect where they start at the bottom, they just kind of keep moving up through the system in various roles. Rockies are loyal. They stick with their people they know, and just shuffling around, I think, different levels in the organization, perfectly fine. And then, in the organizational staff, like you're saying, it's just a lot of familiar faces just in new roles, which can be a whole different thing when they're moving up from a coaching or by working down in Arizona Complex League. They move up and now they're over a much larger thing where maybe they can have a little bit more of an impact across the board, with some of the medical and the performance things. So overall, pretty interesting. But I think officially now, Evan, we can officially say that Scott Oberg is a pitching coordinator for the team. It's that pitching department that got a little bit of a shakeup. Steve Foster, who was instrumental as a pitching coach for the Rockies during those early years of their current rotation. After he moved on and Darryl Scott became pitching coach, he stuck with the organization in kind of a pitching director role, I guess is what it was called. But he's now decided to step away, go spend time with his family, more time with his family, which was always, I think, kind of the plan from the get-go when he stopped being resigned as the pitching coach. He wanted to just spend more time with his family, but now he'll do that wholeheartedly. And so moving in, field pitching coordinator Doug Linton and pitching strategist Flint Wallace, they kind of still are returning, doing their thing, but now they add Scott Oberg in as a pitching coordinator, up from a special assistant of player development and scouting. So good for Oberg, who officially has his title.
Yeah, this is I'm really excited for Scott Oberg, and I'm hoping that we get a chance to talk to him at some point about his new role, because they hadn't officially announced it yet. It's been kind of an open secret, as it were, of, everybody knew that this was his new role, but you couldn't really talk about it much because it hadn't been officially announced yet. So now that the cat's out of the bag, I'm hoping to hear a lot more about it, because I do think it's an interesting combination of, with the departure of Steve Foster, now you've got two pitching coordinators and your pitching strategist in Doug Linton, Scott Oberg, and Flint Wallace sort of making up that team. And I am really interested to see how Oberg contributes, because, Steve Foster, much in the same vein of Bud Black and Darryl Scott, are sort of your old heads when it comes to pitching strategy, versus Scott Oberg was pitching as recently as 2019. He knows the modern game and modern pitching strategy a lot more firsthand. So I think that's going to be really interesting. And I like this move a lot, especially because he's a guy who knows about the challenges of pitching at altitude firsthand. And so I think that's going to be a good shakeup overall. I'm grateful to Steve Foster, everything he's contributed to the organization over the last decade at this point. Wow. But I think there's always a good time for a shakeup, and that time is now. And then I did just want to mention, I do think it's really interesting that the most shakeup in terms of the entire Rockies organizational staff all comes in athletic training and performance development. New names, new faces at basically every level except for AAA. And there are, 5 new names or promotions on the physical performance and athletic training level for the general organizational staff. So I think that's really interesting, and might show sort of a Rockies goal of focusing more on that physical and athletic development as well. I think especially with how many injuries this team has suffered as of late, but also just in terms of general physical performance.
Yeah, knowing that and just improving, and part of that development of teaching players down in the minors of here's how you stay healthy. Here's the big league club. Here's our physical performance regimen and everything. So good stuff. Of course, Charlie Blackmon is on there, special assistant to the GM. Did you know he was a Rockies outfielder from 2011 to 2024?
No,
I'm glad they put that note in there.
Real nobody they brought in. No one's going to know who this guy is.
There's a lot of that
but
stuff.
Hey, he might be a decent immaculate grid answer every now and then.
Yeah. But and then don't worry, there's like other names like Vinny Castilla's not on this list. Vinny's not going anywhere. I think he's still sticking around, and there's a lot of the other organizational things. I think this is like kind of like we were talking about the Rovers, those special assistants. That's where Clint Hurdle, Todd Helton, Charlie Blackmon are in there. So this is really, this organizational staff's more the minor league development stuff. Vinny's on a different special assignment type thing. But here's the big one, Evan. Probably a notable one. Longtime Rockies bullpen catcher and was really the primary interpreter for the Latin players, Spanish-speaking players. Aaron Munoz getting a promotion of sorts, going from the Rockies bullpen catcher. He will be the hitting coach down in the Arizona Complex League under Fred Escazio and Tony Wolters, the bench coach. Heading down there, and Aaron Munoz getting his time to be a hitting coach, which is, it's pretty cool for him.
Yeah, I think this is an awesome move. This is probably one of my favorite change-ups sort of the Rockies organization has thrown. Well, Munoz has been the bullpen catcher for 9 seasons now. He is very well liked in that clubhouse. I've never heard anybody say a negative thing about him. And to have this be his, it's really interesting how the Rockies are looking at their former catchers right now in terms of important roles. So we've got Dustin Garneau, who's previously the catching coordinator, is now the bullpen coach. Tony Wolters is the bench coach down in the ACL, and now Aaron Munoz being the hitting coach. It's really interesting. to look at how they're looking at these organizational catchers.
Mhm.
And there's a couple reasons why I really, really like this move. One of them is that he is fully bilingual, which is something that we've been pushing for. Like, whenever we've talked about changes we'd make to the coaching staff, we frequently discussed like having someone who's bilingual and doesn't need to go through an interpreter for half of his players is, I think, really important in the modern game,
Mhm.
especially on a teaching level. And I think that's really going to be great. But also, it's not like Munoz is, even though he's never been a coach before, that he doesn't know what he's talking about. He did have a minor league career, and he's been involved with the organization for so long as the bullpen catcher and various other odd jobs. If you listen to the Effectively Wild podcast, we were let know that he was just recently on an episode of that podcast back in January that I'd love to go back and listen to at this point, because apparently he was very insightful on that. And he mentions that this was not, he's been offered hitting coach jobs before, and this is the first one he's accepted. So really, really cool. Huge congratulations to Aaron, because I really am curious as to who in this organization is going to eventually have, higher level coaching roles, managerial roles, stuff like that. It's going to be really interesting because there's a lot of different guys. Our hitting coordinator, Nick Wilson, was a coach in the Arizona Fall League. And, there's been rumors that he's eventually being groomed for the big league hitting coach position, which would lead to more shuffles. Bobby Meacham, who a little bit older compared to some of these young guns, but coming off a manager of the year position, he would have been one of my personal picks to replace Bud Black, had Bud Black not returned for the 2025 season. And now you've got Tony Wolters and Aaron Munoz, who have spent substantial time at Coors Field with the team, in that bullpen, on the field, doing all sorts of things. I'm really excited for that. I wish it was easier to watch Arizona Complex League games. Like, if they televise those, I would watch a ton of them, just because I really want to see what goes on down there.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's mostly a lot of just instructional league type stuff, that feel to it. But it's probably just like spring training games all the time, that feel, cycling guys in and whatnot. But yeah, the coaching staffs, organizational staffs, steady on the ship, everything going well. And this is the stuff, like, you're not going to focus on it too much throughout the year, but a lot of good names on there still returning to the organization and changing into different roles. Is hopefully some of these new ideas can come forth in these new roles for some folks and really help improve them in a lot of ways. But a lot of good names across the board. Not too much else to mention here with the organizational staff. Just steady as she goes.
There are a couple departures that I think are worth touching on outside of Steve Foster. Jerry Weinstein is one of the elder statesmen of baseball. He's been with the Rockies for a very long time as a special assistant for player development and scouting, especially when it comes to the catching game and the fielding game. He has departed the organization to take a job with the Chicago Cubs, a team he's worked with before. Also, Marcel Lachman, a former coach for the organization, who was also on in a similar role as Weinstein, departed the organization. And then, as we mentioned before, Steve Foster has also left. Those are interesting ones, because those are sort of the three. I try to think of a more flattering way to phrase this: the old men of the organization.
Yeah.
And it shows the organization, getting younger in terms of a scouting and player development perspective, which is interesting to look at. And of course, the insight that the three of those guys have had on this organization, all extremely valuable. But, there's a time when it's time to get younger and adapt. And I think that's something the Rockies are doing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. But that'll do it here for this segment. Coaching organizational staff. Have they ever officially? Yeah, they officially announced their big league coaching staff, didn't they?
Yes.
I can't remember that press release. And we just know the departures. That was the main thing.
Yeah, really the main departures were Reed Cornelius and PJ Pelletieri.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much everything else was staying the same, I think.
Pretty much. But There we go. So we'll take a break here, move on to our next segment. Don't go anywhere. Plenty left to go here on the Affected by Altitude podcast. Welcome back here to Affected by Altitude. Skylar Timmons, Evan Lang here with you. And we talked about, good old coaching staffs. But hey, that's not all we're here to talk about. We're going to talk about breakfast real quick, particularly the Friends of Baseball Breakfast of Champions thingy. That happens in Greeley every year. Notably, Dick Monfort has gone there. He put his foot in his mouth last couple of years. He has learned his lesson and will not be making predictions anymore, which, hey, he's learned.
Probably for the best.
For the best. But quick there, we got this word from Patrick Saunders, Patrick Lyons, of Dick Monfort. Mainly his takeaways of applauding the fans for their patience over these last 6 consecutive losing seasons, which owners are always going to say that when their team's been terrible for several years. But applauds fans for their patience. And the big things that he emphasized, Evan, the main one, it seemed like, was defense and how he thinks that the Rockies will have the greatest infield defense in the history of the game in the past 150 plus years. The 2025 Rockies will have the best infield in baseball. Evan, do you agree with that statement?
No. But it's not that I think the Rockies infield defense is going to be bad or anything next year. I think this is a classic case of Dick Monfort hyperbole for something that you can't even really quantify.
Yeah.
Of
really
how do you measure up being the greatest infield defense in the history of the modern era of Major League Baseball? Because I do think the defense is going to be really good. Like, don't words hard, brain no think. Don't think that I don't think the defense is going to be bad. You got Ryan McMahon at third, perennial Gold Glove finalist. Ezekiel Tovar short, who just won a Gold Glove. At first base, you've got Michael Toglia, who we've repeatedly said we think can win a Gold Glove. And right now, the starting second baseman is Tyler Estrada. Tyler Estrada is a pretty good defensive second baseman with Adele Amador coming up, and we know that Adele Amador can flash the leather as well. So I don't disagree that it's going to be a good infield defense, maybe even one of the best that the Rockies have had in a while. But I don't think you can even say that it's potentially the best Rockies infield defense ever, because we remember the Coors Shield days, and that was not that long ago.
Yeah.
Where we had, Nolan, Tulo, DJ, and it didn't really matter who was at first base, but we had Todd Helton for a couple of years, and even Mark Reynolds was pretty solid at first base.
Yeah, CJ Crone wasn't bad, and you had other years. Unfortunately, it was during that era of Nolan, Story, and LeMahieu where first base got a little weaker because it was Ian Desmond and Daniel Murphy. You're like, ugh. Oh well. But yeah, like you're saying, Mark Reynolds wasn't terrible. He was like a decent first baseman. CJ Crone has been a decent first baseman. And so, yeah, it's definitely a hyperbole. But the thing with, like, for me is I like defense. It's like, if you like defense, you're going to love the Rockies defense. I love defense. But at the end of the day, defense is like the third priority on my list of things I want to watch the Rockies for to improve. Number one's offense.
Yeah.
And the second one is pitching, which makes your defense good. It doesn't matter how good your defense is if your pitching can't utilize that defense.
Yeah, let's talk about how over the last couple of years, the Rockies have had some of the pitchers with the least amount of run support in all of baseball in Kyle Freeland and Ryan Feltner.
Yeah.
Like, your defense can be outstanding, but you got to score runs to win a baseball game.
Yeah. And, like, it's that part of it comes from that mentality of, where having a really good defense is contingent on you living up to that old Rockies philosophy of ground balls, ground balls, ground balls. But that's not really that sustainable. That's not a key thing to, like, build on.
Yeah,
like,
that's not a strategy that's worked recently.
They had the 8th highest ground ball percentage in 2024 at 43.4%. Ahead of them, Detroit, Boston, Mets, St. Louis, Atlanta, Philly, San Francisco.
And think of
Okay.
how many times the Rockies got blown out of the water despite that high ground
Yeah.
ball rate that they induce.
Yeah. And like I wanted to find like the home run to the fly ball percentage for the Rockies. They did pretty good with fly balls, 35.5%. That was one of the lowest in baseball last year, pitching wise. So like, yeah, like defense helps there, but it's a lot of other things. Don't just put everything like, oh yeah, the defense is going to win us games.
Yeah.
No,
This is not football. You can't go, defense wins championships.
like
Let's talk more about how the Rockies need to induce more quality contact, be better at pitch recognition, and stop striking out so gosh darn much.
yeah, it's like none of us have ever worried about the Rockies defense generally. Like that's just
Yeah.
a staple of them. Like that's fine. Like as
There's
long as
there's
you're
definitely been a
average.
few players recently where we've been like, this guy defensively is not going to hack it. AKA,
Yeah.
Chris Bryant in right field, Chris Bryant at first base, Chris Bryant in left field.
Montero at third, Montero at first,
First.
Montero at DH. Awful defense as a DH. He kept trying to hit the ball.
What'd you do if someone took the field like in a defensive position with a bat instead of a glove, and and they take a swing and hit the ball back into the infield?
a line drive and they swing and smack it back out into the stands.
That actually sounds kind of fun. Now I want to see that. That sounds like Savannah Bananas thing.
Yeah.
Of all right, you got to hit the ball. Outfielders got to hit the ball back into the infield to get the out.
It's those videos of those guys that play tennis with like they play baseball with tennis rackets, and so they pitch the ball and they smack it. It's fun to watch. But yeah, so other things like we're not worried about the defense. We didn't need him to tell us that. Like, yeah, we knew the defense is good. We already knew that. Like even Tyro Estrada, okay, we need him to hit. His defense, yeah, is fine, but we need the offense. That's what we want to worry about. But emphasize that. Also talk about improved pitching, which has been the same song and dance for the Rockies over the last, well, pretty much the past 6 years of 6 consecutive losing seasons of still holding on of, we had so many guys injured, but we need Kyle Freeland, German Marquez, Antonio Senzatella,
Yeah, when you've been
Austin
saying
Gomber, and Ryan Feltner to bounce back.
when you've been saying the same thing about 3 of these guys since 2017. And it's not even that I don't think they can do it, because Kyle Freeland last year, he caught a lot of flack early on. He still gets a lot of flack from fans, but he ended the season as a perfectly cromulent mid-rotation guy.
Yeah, he had some good stretches. All of them
Erman,
did.
we know that he can be good if he can stay healthy. And you know what? He really didn't get a chance to do much last year. Senzatella, of the 3, as much as I love him, is probably the weakest link. But we also know what he's capable of.
And we're also stuck with his contract.
Yes, that too. But at this point, the biggest thing that we want to see is those 3 guys do good, yes. But we also want to see the new guys now. I want to see Chase Dollander and Carson Palmquist and Sean Sullivan and all of those guys. I want to see the new faces.
Yeah.
And if that means we're parting ways with some guy, if that means if we part ways with Austin Gomber or Antonio Senzatella, I'm going to be okay with that. Would I be sad to see Senzi leave? You betcha, because I love Senzi. He's a very nice guy, ton of fun to watch. I've supported him since we first picked him up. But sometimes you got to let people walk.
Mm-hmm. Improved pitching rotation can mean 2 things. It can be you can hope for bounce back from the guys that have been there since 2017. We're close to a decade of these guys being 3 of these guys being a staple in the rotation. So you can focus on that, or it's like you're saying, improved rotation means new faces, new talent, new guys. And I think that was an important thing for Dick Monfort, especially to point out. And we're complimenting Dick Monfort? What the heck? That 2025 will be about laying the foundation with younger guys, and that fans will be impressed, hopefully, that it'll be an exciting brand of Rockies baseball with these young guys. So Dick Monfort seems on board, like, yeah, let's let the young guys in. Bill Schmidt's on board with that. We'll still see with Bud Black. But at least that you have your owner.
He's saying the right things.
Yeah, he's saying the right things at least. And
but I will say this is not the first time we've heard him say the right things
exactly.
and then have those commitments be backtracked.
Exactly.
What I will say is his whole thing of thanking the fans for their patience just reminds me of 10 years ago when he angrily said that Rockies fans who complained didn't deserve to have a team.
Except for my iPad.
So, that's an improvement.
Yeah. Don't bite the hand that feeds you. But yeah, so it'll be a foundational thing. Hopefully we'll see some of these younger guys, especially in that rotation, everything. That would be the fun thing. But it's a win because he didn't stick his foot in his mouth and make an outrageous prediction at the thing. And at least he's self-aware enough to know, like, yeah, I'm probably not going to be making any predictions here, fellas. I promise you.
That's the thing, is like Dick Monfort gets a lot of hate, and a lot of it is justified, and some of it is not. But he's at least somewhat personable, like compared to some of the other owners that you have to deal with, where he can go out there and kind of make fun of himself a little bit and go, all right, guys, I'm not going to make any outlandish predictions this year. Yeah. But then he also turns around and immediately says, I think the defense is going to be the best in the history of baseball.
Oh, goodness.
He's a strange fella, that Dick Monfort.
What are the breakfast options at McDonald's?
Burritos. Ugh. Well, you don't like breakfast burritos?
Not from McDonald's.
Breakfast burritos, it's tortilla and eggs and meat. It's kind of hard to mess up.
The McDonald's would find a way. Ba-da-ba-da-ba. It's adequate.
We personally drop every breakfast burrito on the ground for our dedication towards inducing groundouts.
We only buy the freshest of seasoned veteran eggs.
Old eggs.
They're cheap.
It's like how fried rice is best made with older rice that's starting to go, and you got to use it.
There you go. Yeah, so not too much else to talk about with Dick Monfort there at the breakfast. Pretty standard thing. It's usually not a big thing. He'll just speak to the people there and hey, the reporters and stuff. So good for him. But Evan, I had one idea, but let's talk about this. It's been 4 years since the Rockies' fated trade of Nolan Arenado to the St. Louis Cardinals, receiving a package of prospects. 4 years later, only one player in that return is still a Colorado Rocky, and his name is Austin Gomber. But 4 years later, and everything with the Rockies and everything with Nolan Arenado and the whole situation, I have to ask this question. Are the Rockies better off having made that trade 4 years ago?
Honestly, I don't think anybody won on the trade. I don't think the Cardinals won. I don't think the Rockies won. I don't think either team is better off or worse off now than they were at that time. Maybe the Rockies a little bit, but it depends on if you even think that relationship could have been salvageable. But, we've now seen again, Nolan trying to get out of St. Louis, has been unable to do so, has nixed a trade to the Houston Astros. And, the Cardinals, who brought in Arenado, brought in Paul Goldschmidt, and they come away with nothing in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
They come away with one or two playoff wins?
Zero playoff wins.
Really?
Yeah, they didn't win a single game with Arenado. They made it to the playoffs, but they never got a win. Because it was wild card round and they got bumped pretty quickly.
Yeah. So the Cardinals, they don't come away with anything. And now they're having to blow it all up. Goldschmidt is gone. They're trying to get rid of Arenado, who also wants out. It's funny to me because neither team came out on top.
Mm-hmm.
and for both teams, it was Arenado's contract that he signed that ended up hurting them. Where the Rockies had to throw in that extra $51 million in cash to try and get out from underneath that contract and not have to retain a ton of it. And right now, the Cardinals are having a difficult time getting rid of Arenado because of his contract.
Mm-hmm.
And on the Rocky side of things, none of the players that they got really panned out at all. Elearis Montero was the top prospect in that trade. He couldn't stick it on the big league roster. Now he's often playing in Japan. Mateo Gil got picked up in the Rule 5 draft by the Mets. And has only very briefly made it to AAA. He spent most of his career in High A or AA. Tony Losi, flashed for a little bit, but right now he is
out of baseball.
And
we had traded him to the Rays anyway for some cash.
Yeah, and then, who's the last guy? Jake Summers?
Hardly ever pitched because of injuries, and he retired.
Yeah, and he's retired now. So, at the very least, I say, Austin Gomber's been pretty productive in the grand scheme of things. Yes, he's had some bumps in the road, but overall, he's been fine. But at the end of the day, the big thing for the Rockies, and we talked about this before the show, is I think the only thing that maybe would have made a huge difference with keeping Arenado on the Rockies is the Rockies then don't sign Chris Bryant.
Well, yeah, because this is the whole what if scenario. Because let's assume that after 2020 would have been after 2021 that Arenado's opt out would have come into play. So let's say after those first couple of years of that contract extension, he triggers his opt out. That I wonder how that whole scenario would have played out for between him and the Rockies. Was he just going to trigger his opt out and we'll lose him for nothing, or is we going to try and convince him or try to do something to negate that opt out? It's a fun to go back and thought experiment of playing what if. Like, okay, well, what if he doesn't trigger that opt out and the Rockies still have him as of today through 2024, heading into 2025? Because I'll say, like you're saying, if we don't trade him, we probably don't sign Chris Bryant. And guess who's been productive in various degrees, but way more productive still in contributing throughout his time in St. Louis? Well, it's been Nolan Arenado. Yeah. Even if he's had some decline these last couple of years, he's still been durable, productive contributor for that team.
Yeah. 3-time All-Star, 2 Gold Gloves, a Silver Slugger, came third in MVP voting in 2022. Like, he's still been productive, but he hasn't helped the Cardinals win.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like it's a team sport.
Yeah, and you can look at his wins above replacement, and he's putting up solid wins above replacement. Like, his best since going to St. Louis was in 2022, where he put up 7.7. But the last 2 years, he's only been worth 2.4 and 2.5.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a difference maker, but it's not a huge difference maker. And when the rest of the team around him isn't that good, especially with pitching, that's been a big issue with the Cardinals. It's funny to me because he went from one situation into another one.
Yeah.
That are pretty similar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's been an interesting just journey for him, which is pretty interesting. But it's nice to look back 4 years later in the perspective, and I think we're done paying a small portion of his salary. It's either this year or next year. We're almost done just paying off the $5 million that got restructured, where we're just paying him $5 million a year.
It'll be next year. Will be the last year.
So, like, all said and done, like, we can joke about the $50 million, and yeah, it was kind of dumb, but they still got out from that contract. And I think what makes that trade worse is that they just turned around and threw that money at Chris Bryant.
Yeah,
that's the biggest debacle in all of this. That's not even directly related to the trade, but it kind of is, where the backlash is so much. Oh no, Evan, am I? Are we the fans to blame for Chris Bryant being signed?
I
The
mean,
backlash was so much that Dick Monfort panicked and I need a superstar for the fans.
I admit that I wrote an article praising the signing of Chris Bryant, saying that I thought this was a good way to add some superstar talent and let Bill Schmidt start building the team his way. And the further out we get from it, not only is it very clearly more of a Dick Monfort signing than a Bill Schmidt signing, it's also done nothing but hurt the team.
Mm-hmm.
So
So you heard it here first. It's Evan's fault.
it's my fault.
Yeah, it's just a fun what if experiment to think about. But yeah, Austin Gomber, we didn't get the return or production that we had hoped for from trading Arenado. It's a whole mess, and it's kicked off a lot of exodus and a chain reaction of a lot of things for the Rockies, I think, too. So, no, personally, fair, I think the Rockies are worse off after that trade than the Cardinals because at least the Cardinals have made it to the playoffs. Even if they've lost, they have recent success. Whereas the Rockies, then, well, no Arenado. That means Story had no desire to stick around here. He's gone. John Gray decided to look for greener pastures elsewhere because we kind of shortchanged him. It's led them to try and they hurt themselves with the Chris Bryant signing, but that's handcuffed them, and now they can't. They're scared to spend money elsewhere to try and improve the team. They get stuck with players that are underperforming, even though they praise their defense at third base. Guy that kind of underperforms. So it's the trade kicked off a weird domino effect for the Rockies that they're still trying to bounce back from. Yeah. Hopefully, we're saying, we're hoping to see a turn now with these younger guys and get this new generation going. But that trade handcuffed them in a way that has really hurt them.
Yeah, well, and
it's like trying to open that window of contention.
Honestly, the first domino of that was Nolan versus everything else, because we've talked about before, and I've talked about it extensively, that most of that 2017, 2018 team was homegrown talent. And outside of DJ LeMahieu leaving, and after 2018, really the first major piece to depart was Nolan when he forced himself out. And then Nolan leaving is what triggered the rest of the dominoes to fall.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that all the dominoes started falling and Nolan was the last piece. It was that Nolan's discontent, rather, set everything else into motion. And I'm not saying it's his fault that the Rockies are bad right now, but it's just worth noting that the situation, ultimately, in my opinion, is caused by his departure. Because, like you said, Trevor Story leaves, John Gray leaves, the team loses talent and gets worse, and people who don't want to stick around for a variety of reasons, several of them, at least part of it being that Nolan left.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, because he was the foundational guy. No, he's that pillar holding up the team. He signs that big contract. And then when there's nothing built around to help support him, that pillar starts to shake. He wants out. It crumbles. Everything else starts coming down with it. And then Jeff Bridich leaves, and then Bill Schmidt has tried to build things up a little bit now, but there's still a lot of work to do for this team, and you need some of these other guys coming up. And Ezekiel Tovar, which props to him wanting to take on that leadership role. The young kid, connect more with the fans, embracing Colorado, and wants the city of Denver to realize who he is as a person. Props to that young kid, which is weird. Like, yeah, he's younger than me, but he's mature beyond his years more than me. He doesn't do a podcast with dumb bits, joking about stuff, but he's one take on that.
We don't know.
Hey, he might, but he wants to be that pillar and embrace that role, and hopefully that can be the start of building something new for the Rockies and pick up from the ashes of the Nolan Arenado trade. 4 years later, I think the dust is kind of settled, and like you're saying, like, nobody's really won from it. Rockies have had their own struggles. Cardinals are dealing with their own things. But now's the time, 4 years later, we can kind of look past and like, okay, let's look to the future and start building something.
It's time to move on.
Yeah.
The book is closed. The
Yeah.
money that's being paid to Nolan Ryan from the Rockies is negligible. Like $5 million is chump change.
That's Tyro Estrada.
Yeah, that's Tyro Estrada and a league veteran pitcher or something
It's
like that.
Tyro Estrada and Justin Lawrence.
And it's time to move on. There's a new foundation being built.
Yeah. So yeah, 4 years later, we can kind of dust our hands of it and like, well, it is what it is. We didn't like it. Still don't like it. It's still a dumb trade. But hey, it's not the dumbest trade to happen on February 1st anymore. Thank you, Dallas Mavericks and Los Angeles Lakers.
I'm so sorry, Mavericks fans. I am so sorry.
Mm-hmm. Rough go of it. But yeah, fun stuff. Interesting scenario as we look back on that 4 years later. All right, we'll take a break. When we come back, it's another player projection for the most durable man in the history of Colorado sports. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Here on Affected by Altitude, Skylar and Evan. And closing things out, we'll have our next little player projection adventure here, which, Evan, I've liked doing these. It's fun to kind of look at these guys and kind of see where they're at and what we hope for them to do in the coming season. And perhaps the stakes aren't higher for any other player than the $182 million man himself, Chris Bryant, who is the next subject for our projections. And Evan, what are our hopes for Chris Bryant in 2025?
I mean, it's the same thing that literally everyone has been saying is he's got to stay on the field.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully not actually be in the field that much. Like he should be the team's primary DH. I don't want to see him frequently out in right or at first or really anywhere. And it really is. This year is this year 4 of the contract?
Yes. This is the 4th year.
And he's yet to have even 350 plate appearances in a Colorado Rockies uniform. The most games he's played in a single season with the Rockies is 80 in 2023. He only played 37 games last year and 42 in 2022. And projection-wise, interestingly enough, Fangraphs has him playing 112 with 483 plate appearances. And the pessimist in me goes, there's no way that is happening.
And how depressing is that, where we can look at those numbers and like, those seem too high.
The Zips projections are a little more down to earth, where they have him at 308 plate appearances and appearing in
74 games.
Yeah. That's
oh my goodness.
A little more realistic, honestly. And hey, like if he can like max out on the Fangraphs projections and actually do that, that'd be amazing. But it would also be the first time that he's had over 400 plate appearances with the team since in a season since 2021, and the first time he had more than 400 plate appearances with just one team since 2019. Like it's been a rough go for KB, and even his projections don't have him as being very productive, where they have him hitting 14 home runs, 56 RBIs, 1 stolen base for some reason, which if they send him to steal, I'm going to be like, what are you doing? He has no stolen bases in his Rockies tenure, and that's probably for the best. An 8.5% walk rate, a 23.9% strikeout rate, and a slash of 247, 323, 401. Now, over on the Zips projections, it is again a little more a little different. It tends to be a little different for each player. They have him at 243, 328, 382. But either way, that's still not that good.
Yeah, 8 home runs, 14 doubles, 44 singles. Zips is ain't looking too good. Yeah, 76 strikeouts. All right, 28 walks. Oh, it's in 74 games.
Yeah, and these are perhaps generous for Chris Bryant, who has seen diminishing returns every season since he stepped on the field for the Rockies. 2022, in the 42 games he played, he hit 306, 376, 475, had 5 home runs. But then the next year, 233, 313, 367. And then last season, 218, 323, 301. Just everything keeps ticking down more and more. Mm-hmm. His strikeout rate was 31% in 155 plate appearances last year. Mm-hmm. And that's way too high for a guy who's never really had that bad of a strikeout rate. He hasn't had a strikeout rate of 30 or higher since his rookie season. But we've mentioned before that his swing mechanics right now, for where he is at in his career, are just not going to work, where he's got a very long, very slow swing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it leads to a lot of strikeouts and not enough anything else. And I think that's thing is over on Baseball Reference, their projections are pretty much just as harsh. 311 plate appearances, 8 home runs. He has 2 steals, so there you go. Baseball Reference looking at more steals. 243 average, 322 on base, 373 slugging, a 685 OPS. You can look across these projections and what he's done even when Chris Bryant has been quote unquote healthy. He's done very little in a Rockies uniform. How he got 10 home runs in 2023 is beyond me. But you just watch him, like when he can make contact, and on those home run swings, you see Chris Bryant of old. But more often than not, we're kind of in it's like watching Carlos Gonzalez in his last couple of years, where the good swing is in there. It's just too dang slow, too long, and it doesn't do enough damage when he does make contact.
Yeah,
and didn't have a degenerative back disorder.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's like, it's hard to be positive on any projections for Bryant because of how often he's hurt, and how when you're 32, 33 years old, a degenerative back condition just isn't going to get better to the point where you're going to be able to play quality baseball. I mean, he only had 2 home runs last year in 155 plate appearances, and it was neither of them were like flabbergasting home runs,
wall scrapers.
And it sucks because you look back at Chris Bryant of old, his first couple seasons with the Cubs, and you go, there might be a Hall of Famer in this guy. And now 10 years later, you're going, why is this guy not retired?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so hopefully maybe those coaching, like those organizational staff changes brought in of solving how do we help Chris Bryant stay healthy. And no, hopefully, no, I know they talk about, we could throw him in the outfield on the road a couple times a week.
Don't do that.
Which, like maybe one start a week. That's it. Anything more than one, then you're playing with fire there.
Yeah.
But he needs to be the regular DH. I don't care if that should be the expectation, is you are everyday DH, focus on hitting, get back right with your hitting, and start contributing. Stop with we love his versatility. We expect him. We still see him as an outfielder, first baseman, when those guys need rest. No, you have other guys on the bench to do that. Kyle Farmer can do that. He can play first base. You have your 4th outfielder. He'll play the outfield instead of whoever's in right field.
Hell, you really want him to. Sam Hilliard could pick up a first baseman's glove if you really needed him to. But for Chris Bryant,
Ryan McMahon
it needs to be the same as end stage Charlie Blackmon, of you are keeping him healthy and rested by not having him run around in the outfield all the time, by not having him risk injury all the time. Because the last couple of years of Blackmon's career, remember, he had a bunch of like nagging hamstring issues a bunch. And he didn't really have to deal with that the last 2 seasons or so because he was more the DH and they keep him fresh. But Charlie Blackmon was at least a career outfielder. Chris Bryant is not that. He's not a career first baseman. He's barely a career third baseman. At this point, I do not want to hear, oh, he's so versatile, because he's not. Because when he's played in the outfield, he's been bad. When he's played first base, he's been bad. He is versatile in that, yes, he can pick up those gloves for those positions and play them. But you know what? So could I, and you don't want me out there.
Yeah. Like, you can be, there's a difference between versatile and a utility. And, you need a player that's a utility, can play good defense at pretty much most any position that he's put at. A versatile player, yeah, he can play those positions. They're not going to be very good at some of them. So that's part of the, like, stick him as the DH. That's that expectation. Keep him as the DH so we can just focus on that hitting. Because, man, you look at those numbers and they are just depressing. And so that's what I would like to see him in spring training. And it's hard when you get these veteran players who've done it a certain way for their whole career to get them to change. It's really tough. And I don't know if the Rockies are equipped to help Bryant fix that. Instead of, well, just go out there, keep swinging. Like, no, there's some mechanical adjustments, approach adjustments he needs to make at this stage in his career.
Yeah.
He can't afford to be stubborn about it.
I mean, here's the thing: is that we have no real idea on what Chris Bryant's been up to this offseason. But just from
in the regular season,
an outside perspective, you and I think, both know what he should have been doing all this time, which is working on shortening his swing, trying to get his bat speed up a little bit, but at the very least, to shorten up that swing, choke up on the bat a little bit in order to shorten up that swing if he has to. Frankly, if I was him, I'd probably be experimenting with different bat handle types to see if there's some way that they could assist in his mechanics. Try an axe handle, try a different knob, something like that. But then also just making sure that you are mechanically sound and willing to make changes.
Yeah.
And do what the team needs you to be. He will never be 2016 Chris Bryant ever again.
Yeah.
But if he can at least shift himself into a somewhat productive player, and this contract will never not be an albatross, but he can at least make it sting a little bit less. And honestly, like, my expectations are extremely low. And I don't like feeling that way about Chris Bryant. He seems like a perfectly nice fella, but like, I would consider a successful season for him if he can play 90 games, and that is a low bar.
Well, yeah, I was about to say, if he could do what he did in Chicago in 2021, he played 93 games, had 18 home runs, 51 ribbies, 267 average, 358 on base, 503 slugging with the Cubs before he was traded to San Francisco. We're, again, still productive. But if we take just what he did there in Chicago, 93 games, and like that's the goal to get to, which is, again, pitiful and depressing to say. He needs to play 90 games. That's 10 more games than his most in his Rockies career. But that seems realistic at this point with the injury history. And like we're saying, the production on the field because of the injuries, it's a double-edged sword of when he's healthy, he's still got those nagging injuries. They have sapped his offensive abilities. His offensive abilities are lacking, and that leads to other frustrations and stuff. But I think that 2021 Cubs tenure, that seems like a realistic goal for him. And if he can play more, great. If not, well, 93 is still more than 80 or 40 or 30.
Yeah, it's tough. Of everyone on this team, on this Rockies team, the guy that is being paid $182 million, the guy that's making $27 million this year, is the guy for whom our expectations are the lowest. I don't think there is a single other player on this roster going into 2025 whom we've got lower expectations for.
Yeah, the bar is very, very low because that's what he's shown in 3 years in a Rockies uniform. And the team can keep trying to move the goalposts of, oh, we just want him to be one of the guys. No, you brought him in as your superstar talent to be a force in that lineup. That's been their messaging this offseason. We need him to be the slugger. He's our slugger. He hasn't proven to be a slugger. He has 17 home runs over 3 years. He
He
hasn't
hasn't hit more. He hasn't hit more than 20 home runs since 2021.
He's only played in 159 games, not even a full 162 game season in
And it
3
just
years.
keeps getting worse. It's not to the point where he is a guy that we know can be good and is just struggling. It's that he is an active drain on the team. That he has now back-to-back seasons of worth being negative WAR.
Mm-hmm. One of the worst on the Rockies, least valuable. And that's not what you want from a player that you're paying $27 million to. And so that's the frustrating part. And I think, Evan, here's another thing that I wanted to mention of beyond him being on the field, it's embrace the Rockies, embrace being in Denver, become a figure in the community. That's what was refreshing to hear from Tovar saying, I want the fans to know who I am. I wanted them to know me and like my interests and other things, know about me. And so working on his English and all those things so he can communicate with the fans better. Tovar wants to be in that public eye for the fans and with the
Yep.
community and the team.
And Brenton
Chris Bryant,
Doyle.
yeah, and Brenton Doyle.
We've publicly talked about wanting to step up into a leadership position.
But meanwhile, and like it's understandable, maybe it's embarrassment or just who he is as a reserved person, but he's got to make that effort to connect with the community and try to create some goodwill of some kind. Show up with the Rockies charity at some event. Do something so we can look like, yeah, well, Chris Bryant, he's had his troubles, but at least we know he's a good guy. We know something about him.
Yeah,
I know nothing about Chris Bryant after 3 years.
He had his Lamborghini stolen.
Yeah, I know that. And like, we call him every week, Evan, and he doesn't tell me anything.
He just says he's made peace with it.
That doesn't make any sense.
That's the thing. And he's never done anything to shake the allegations that have been there since he first signed with the team of he was here because we were the team that would pay him the most money and he wouldn't have any expectations to help the team succeed.
Yeah. And I think that's especially in 2025 because 2024 was a rough PR year for Chris Bryant, starting with that interview in The Athletic, and it just kept getting worse every time he was injured. And then he had to have a little interview with Thomas Harding. Nothing was helping. And like, yeah, you feel for the guy. I'm sure he's frustrated with the injuries. And when he's talking about crying at night and just being frustrated, yeah, you can have sympathy for it and like empathy. But still, then he'll turn around like, well, I'm trying my best. I want to be there with the guys. Well, why aren't you traveling with the team while you're injured?
Yeah, I think more than anything in 2025, we need to see Chris Bryant grab the reins of both his career and of the narrative.
Yeah.
And prove, and not to say that he hasn't been trying to prove, but really make a concerted effort to prove, yes, I still want to be playing baseball. Yes, being on the Rockies is important to me. Yes, I value this clubhouse and my teammates and the community of Denver.
Mm-hmm.
Do something.
Yeah.
The ball is very firmly in his court.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we can look at Charlie Blackmon. Was his production the greatest over these last couple seasons? No, not really. Like sometimes he's another one of those like it's not really contributing a whole lot. Contributing some, but not a whole lot. But because of who we knew Chuck was and how he embraced Colorado and his role in it, we still loved Charlie Blackmon for it.
Yeah.
And supported him and cheered for him. When we saw that he was struggling a little bit, we'd still step up for him. Chris Bryant, nobody's stepping up for him. He's getting booed after his third strikeout of the game. You know, it goes both ways. Make us love you, Chris Bryant.
But it's even that Charlie Blackmon, who's 4 years older than Chris Bryant, was more productive in each of his last 2 seasons than Chris Bryant. Played more games, was worth more in terms of offensive statistics, worth more in terms of wins above replacement, positive WAR each year. Yeah, even played the outfield like pretty solidly. Like Chuck Nasty earned the benefit of the doubt. And he didn't even really underperform that much. He performed about as well as I'd expect a guy who's 38 years old to perform.
Yeah, so that's the thing with Chris Bryant. We need him to play and contribute.
Yeah, I don't see a special assistant to the GM role in Chris Bryant's future.
Yeah, probably not. Actually, let's ask him. Wait for it.
Hello.
Hey, Chris Bryant. It's Bill Schmidt. How you doing?
Oh, hey. Well, I'm doing good. I'm getting ready for the season. I feel healthy and ready to contribute.
Have you done any? You don't have any interviews lined up, do you?
No. I learned my lesson there.
Yeah, let's learn from that. We already had a hard enough time talking to Dick Monfort about that kind of thing. So, hey, we're just talking about your projections. How many games do you think you're going to be able to play this year?
All of them.
Come on, Chris. Like seriously, like how many do you think you can play this year?
Oh, I guess it might make sense if I miss one or two. Just, rest the legs, rest the back. Let's say 160.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great, Chris. Yeah, we would love that. How many games do you think you can play in the outfield?
All of them.
You keep up that enthusiasm, buddy.
Let's just can we make sure that can we ask about having those nets taken down? Those things are scary.
No, those are for the fan safety.
What about my safety?
Well, we'll talk to you about that. But yeah, Chris, after this, hey, what do you think about having a job with a special assistant to the GM after you're done playing?
Does it come with a new Lamborghini?
No.
Vinny Castilla got a purple sports car.
Vinny bought that with his own money.
I bought mine with my own money, and then it got stolen, and it helped uncover a massive Vietnamese car smuggling ring.
Yeah, well, it's part of your FBI, CIA work there, Chris. We appreciate your service. It was for a greater cause.
Chris Bryant. The name's Bryant. Chris Bryant.
I'm going to hang up now.
All right. I'll see you in the spring. 2 weeks to go.
Mm-hmm. Keep doing those stretches.
My back.
No. He strains his back, hanging up the phone. Yeah. Those are our projections for Chris Bryant. No ways to sugarcoat it. We need a lot more from him. Something.
Yeah.
Anything.
It's tough because you look at the wins above replacement totals for everybody on the team last year, and of the 4 players that had fewer wins above replacement than Bryant, 2 of them are no longer on the team, and 1 of them was a rookie.
Mm-hmm. Tough go of it.
It's not great.
Not great. But that'll end it here for this edition of Affected by Altitude. As always, we appreciate you tuning in and checking out with us every week. Evan, where can the folks find you?
Well, you can find me on purplerow.com, writing the rock piles and also picking back up the Pebble Report. If you missed it last week, we have our first Pebble Report of the new season, in which I introduce the pitchers on the non-roster invitee list for spring training. So please check that out, as well as my regular rock piles. You can also find me over on Blue Sky at EvanLang27.
And you can find me over at purplerow.com, writing Wednesday rock piles, and writing over at fansfirstsports.com. Find me over on the Twitter's at Skylar Timmons, also on Blue Sky at STimmons13. Good times. And as always, find us on the social medias and over on YouTube and your favorite podcasting platform. We appreciate you tuning in. We'll hopefully looking to have more fun this season. We'll try to figure out some other stuff to do. But until next time, I'm Skylar. That's Evan. This has been Affected by Altitude. Farewell.
Farewell.
This has been Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast with Rocky Mountain Rooftop, a proud affiliate of the Fans First Sports Network. Catch new episodes every Monday on wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Be sure to follow us on YouTube as well for video versions of the show.